Let me tell you how one sentence from my husband became the match that burned our marriage down, and how I walked out before he even realized what he'd just given me. 6 years. That's how long I'd been trying to make us feel like a home instead of a routine. 6 years of shared keys, shared bills, shared dinners that slowly turned into me eating alone while he was still at the office, still with the team, still networking. But the night it finally snapped wasn't loud at first. It was a Friday, my third Friday in a row, watching the clock like it owed me an explanation. I was in the kitchen, making a small dinner for one, the kind of sad meal you don't admit you've normalized. The faucet was running because I'd forgotten to turn it off, and the sound of water felt like the only thing in the house that still had a purpose. Then he came downstairs. He wore that clean, sharp look men put on when they want to be seen. Hair styled, shirt fitted, a hint of the expensive cologne I bought him last Christmas, the one he claimed he was saving for special nights. Apparently going out with Dominique, his coworker, his best friend, his constant notification, qualified as special. "You're going out again?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral because I was too tired to beg. He looked at me like I was a roommate complaining about noise. "Yes, it's Friday night," he said, cold and flat. "I work hard all week. I deserve to enjoy myself with Dominique and a few others from the office." My fingers tightened around the knife I'd been using to slice vegetables. Not in anger, more like my body was trying to hold itself together. "This isn't about friendship," I said quietly. "It's about respect, about priorities, about what a marriage is supposed to." He cut me off with a small, cruel emphasis that landed like a slap. "If you can't handle how I choose to live," he said, "then just leave." For a second, I swear even the air stopped moving. Water kept running, my heart kept beating, and somewhere inside me, something clicked into place. Clean, calm, final. He grabbed his keys, checked his phone, and walked out like my whole life was an inconvenience. "I'll be home late," he called over his shoulder. "Don't wait up." The door shut, the engine started, the taillights vanished, and I stood there in that kitchen, staring at the cutting board, thinking, he thinks I'll stay. He thinks I'll swallow this too. He was wrong, because that was the night I packed my life into silence and left him exactly what he asked for, his freedom. I'm Emma. And before anyone decides this story is about a dramatic woman overreacting, I need you to understand something. I didn't wake up one morning and throw 6 years away because of a single argument. That sentence, "then just leave," wasn't the first crack. It was just the moment I finally stopped pretending the cracks weren't already a whole fracture line running through our marriage. I met my husband, Carson, when I was 26. I worked as a project coordinator for a construction supply company. It wasn't glamorous. No sleek downtown office, no fancy titles, no cocktail networking events. But it was steady, good benefits, reliable paychecks, the kind of job that makes you feel safe, even if it doesn't make you feel seen. Carson, he had this way of looking like life was always moving in his favor. He wasn't mean in the beginning. That's the part people don't talk about enough, how most heartbreak doesn't start with cruelty. It starts with comfort, with jokes, with routines, with little rituals that make you think, this is it. This is what stability feels like. We dated for 2 years before we got married. He proposed the traditional way. One knee, a ring that I didn't pick out, a nervous laugh in his throat like he couldn't believe I might say no. I remember crying, not because it was perfect, but because it felt real, like we were choosing each other in front of the whole world. Our first years of marriage weren't awful. They just weren't remarkable. We weren't the couple that made people jealous. We didn't have the kind of love that lit up a room. We had the kind of love that kept the lights on. We split chores without tracking points. We went to family dinners. We watched shows in bed. We bought little things for the apartment like we were building a future one IKEA receipt at a time. If I'm being honest, I thought that's what marriage was supposed to look like. Not fireworks, just commitment. Somewhere around year 4, things began to shift. Carson got a position with a downtown consulting firm, one of those places where people wore nice shoes just to sit in front of a laptop and still somehow came home smelling like someone else's ambition. He started making new friends. The kind that didn't invite spouses. The kind that spoke in inside jokes I wasn't part of. The kind that made him feel like he was becoming someone bigger than the life we were living together. At first, I didn't object. I told myself people need their own identity, their own social circle, their own space. I even tried to be supportive. When he'd come home late, I'd keep dinner warm. When he'd talk about office politics, I'd listen. When he'd laugh at a text message and tilt his phone away without thinking, I'd swallow the small sting in my throat and tell myself it didn't mean anything. Because I wasn't the jealous type. I didn't want to be the wife who policed friendships. I didn't want to be the woman who became smaller just to keep a man from leaving. And then Dominique entered our lives. She was his colleague. Smart, social, always so funny, according to Carson. The first time I heard her name, it sounded harmless. Just another coworker. But her name started showing up everywhere. Lunch with Dominique. Extended project sessions with Dominique. Phone buzzing at dinner. Dominique. Texting in bed while I brush my teeth. Dominique. It wasn't just that he spent time with her. It was that everything started to revolve around her, like our marriage was the thing in the background, and she was the real storyline. The first time I said something, I tried to sound calm. Carson, don't you think it's a bit much? I asked one night, watching him type while I sat on the couch feeling like furniture. He didn't even look up. What is? How often you're with her, how often you're texting her. It's constant. That was when he finally looked at me, and his expression wasn't guilty. It was annoyed. Emma, it's not like that, he said, like he'd practiced the sentence. She's my best friend at work. We collaborate. We talk. That's normal. Normal for a married man? I asked quietly. He scoffed. A small sound, but it cut. You're being jealous. It's such an outdated mindset, he said. Men and women can be friends. You know that, right? And there it was. He flipped it. Not my concern. My flaw. My insecurity. My antiquated perspective. And I did what a lot of women do when we're trying to keep peace. I doubted myself. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe I was reading into things. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I needed a hobby. Maybe I needed to be cooler, calmer, more modern, more understanding. So I tried. I tried to be the wife who didn't complain. I tried to be the wife who trusted. I tried to be the wife who smiled when he said he was going out again, even when my chest felt tight like my body knew the truth before my brain was ready to admit it. I even tried with his family. Because yes, his family noticed he was out more. They noticed he wasn't home. They noticed I started showing up alone to gatherings sometimes. And when his mother would tilt her head and ask, "Where's Carson tonight?" I'd laugh too quickly and say, "Work stuff," because saying my husband would rather be with another woman than sit with me on a Sunday felt like a humiliation I wasn't ready to speak out loud. I kept protecting him, even while he was quietly unbuilding our marriage one late night at a time. By the third weekend in a row of him going out, something in me started to harden, not into rage, into clarity. Because love can survive a lot, but it can't survive being treated like an option. And by the time we reached that Friday night in the kitchen, the black dress energy, the special cologne, the icy voice, I wasn't discovering who my husband was. I was finally accepting what he'd been showing me for months. And that acceptance was the beginning of my exit. The thing about betrayal, real betrayal, is that it rarely announces itself with one dramatic moment. It seeps in, quietly, through small absences, through changed tones, through the way someone stops explaining themselves because they no longer feel accountable. After that first argument about Dominique, nothing technically changed. And that was the problem. Carson didn't stop seeing her. He didn't reduce the texting. He didn't reassure me in any way that mattered. What he did do was become more careful, more vague, more emotionally unavailable. He started using words like overreacting, controlling, and dramatic whenever I tried to express discomfort. Conversations didn't escalate into shouting matches. They just died quietly, like I was speaking into a room where no one planned to answer. If I asked where he was going, I got half-truths. Out! With who? People from work. Dominique's name stopped appearing, not because she wasn't there, but because he'd learned that omission was easier than confrontation. And that's when the atmosphere in our home shifted. Dinner felt awkward. Silence stretched longer. He'd sit on the opposite end of the couch, phone in hand, smiling at messages that had nothing to do with me. At night, he turned away in bed, not dramatically, not angrily, just absent. I'd lie there staring at the ceiling, listening to the rhythm of his breathing, wondering when I became someone he slept next to instead of someone he chose. His friends noticed too, or maybe they always knew, and I was the last one to catch up. At a work event, one I was invited to as an afterthought, I stood alone near the bar, while Carson laughed across the room with Dominique and a small circle of coworkers. She leaned in close when she spoke. He didn't step back. Someone brushed past me and murmured, "Oh, you're Carson's wife." Not Emma. Not a name. Just a role. When I finally walked over, Dominique smiled brightly, like I was an unexpected interruption. "Emma, we talk about you all the time," she said too fast. Carson didn't correct her. Didn't add anything. didn't touch my arm or introduce me properly or ground me into his world in any meaningful way. I stood there feeling like a guest in my own marriage. Later that night, in the car, I finally asked the question that had been sitting in my chest for weeks. "Do you have feelings for her?" He laughed. Actually laughed. "Wow," he said. "That's what this is about?" "Yes," I said softly. "That's exactly what this is about." He shook his head, eyes fixed on the road. "You're projecting. You're insecure. And honestly, Emma, it's exhausting." That word, exhausting. Not heartbreaking, not confusing. Exhausting. Like loving me had become a chore. I stopped asking after that. Not because I stopped caring, but because I started paying attention. I noticed how he stopped telling me his plans in advance, how his phone stayed locked, how he became defensive over nothing, how weekends became something he spent away from me instead of with me. His family didn't help. When I gently mentioned to his sister that Carson seemed distant, she waved it off. "He's just growing," she said. "You know how men get when their careers take off." As if emotional neglect were a milestone. As if marriage were something women were expected to endure quietly while men found themselves. I started pulling inward. Not dramatically, not in protest, just quietly preparing. I didn't realize it at the time, but this was when I began detaching. I focused more on work. I stayed late sometimes, not to mirror his behavior, but because being useful felt better than being unwanted. I stopped planning weekends around him, stopped asking, stopped hoping. And somewhere deep down, a question started forming, one I didn't want to answer yet. If he's already living like he's single, what exactly am I holding on to? By the time that Friday night arrived, the third consecutive weekend, the black dress, the cold voice, I wasn't walking into a surprise. I was walking into confirmation. And when he told me to leave if I couldn't accept his life, it didn't hurt the way he thought it would, because by then I already knew the truth. I wasn't losing my husband. I was finally letting go of someone who'd left me a long time ago. The moment that ended my marriage didn't come with screaming or slammed doors. It came with a sentence delivered so casually that it told me everything I needed to know about where I stood in my own life. Friday night, again. I remember checking the clock and feeling that familiar heaviness settle in my chest, the quiet dread of knowing what was coming, but still hoping, stupidly, that maybe this time would be different. It wasn't. I was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables, trying to pretend I was cooking because I wanted to eat, instead of because I needed something to do with my hands. The apartment felt hollow, too quiet, like it already knew one of us was leaving. Then I heard his footsteps on the stairs. Carson appeared in the doorway like he was stepping onto a stage. Black button-down, perfectly pressed, hair styled with intention. That expensive cologne, my gift, lingering in the air. He didn't look like a man heading out for casual drinks. He looked like someone trying to impress. I swallowed. "You're really going out again?" I asked, keeping my tone level, almost detached. I didn't want to sound hurt. I didn't want to sound angry. I just wanted him to hear me. He turned slowly, eyes cool, expression unfamiliar. "Yes," he said, "it's Friday." That was it. No apology, no explanation, no acknowledgement that this was the third weekend in a row I'd be eating alone. "I work all week," he continued. "I deserve to enjoy myself." "With Dominique?" I asked quietly. Something flickered across his face, annoyance, not guilt. "Yes," he said flatly, "with Dominique and other people, from work." I set the knife down carefully, like sudden movements might shatter something fragile inside me. "This isn't about you having friends," I said. "It's about respect. It's about boundaries. It's about me feeling like your wife instead of—" He cut me off. "If you can't handle how I choose to live," he said, emphasizing the word like a challenge, "then just leave." The words hit harder than shouting ever could. My ears rang. My heart pounded so loud I could hear it in my throat. The room felt too bright, too exposed, like I was standing under a spotlight without a script. "Carson," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "do you hear yourself?" He didn't answer. He grabbed his wallet, his keys, his phone. "I'll be home late," he said, already checking the screen. "Don't wait up." And then he walked out. The door closed with a solid final sound. The faucet was still running. I stood there staring at the sink, the vegetables forgotten, the water overflowing just enough to drip onto the counter. Just leave. I waited for the wave of panic, for the tears, for the desperate urge to chase him down the driveway and beg him to choose me. None of it came. Instead, there was this strange, unnatural calm, like my body had finally stopped fighting what my mind had been denying. I turned off the faucet. The silence that followed was deafening. I stood there for a full 5 minutes, replaying his tone more than his words, the way he'd said it without hesitation, without fear. without care. He didn't think I would actually go. He thought he was calling my bluff. I walked upstairs slowly, each step steady, deliberate. In our bedroom, I opened the closet. My side was neat, folded, organized. His side was chaos, clothes spilling off hangers, shoes shoved into corners, a reflection of the disorder he'd been carrying into our marriage. I sat on the edge of the bed and took out my phone. My hands didn't shake. I made 3 calls. The first was to Brenna, my closest friend from college. "I need a huge favor," I said when she picked up. "Can you bring your truck over in about an hour?" She didn't ask why. "Of course," she said. "I'm on my way." The second call was to my younger brother, Griffin. "I'm leaving Carson tonight," I said. There was a pause. Then, "I'll be there. Tell me what you need." The third call was to Callum, a friend who still owed me for helping him move the year before. "I'm calling in that favor," I said. "I need muscle, tonight." And then I started packing. 6 years. 6 years of shared life reduced to choices made in silence. I packed only what was mine. Clothes, documents, my laptop, my passport, my birth certificate, the tools in the garage I'd bought myself, family photos that existed before Carson ever entered my life. I left everything else. The furniture, the dishes, the TV, the coffee maker he loved more than our conversations. Those things weren't worth fighting over. I wasn't trying to punish him. I was reclaiming myself. By the time the first knock came at the door, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Clarity. Because when a man tells you to leave, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is listen. Packing didn't feel dramatic. That was the strangest part. I'd imagined, at least in passing, that if I ever left my marriage, it would come with sobbing, shaking hands, second-guessing every folded shirt, that I'd collapse onto the bed and grieve the life I was abandoning. Instead, I moved with a calm that scared me a little, like someone who had already mourned. Each item I picked up felt intentional, not rushed, not angry, just precise, as if my body knew exactly what needed to go and what needed to stay behind. 6 years of marriage teaches you something uncomfortable. Most of what fills a home isn't actually essential. It's just shared. And I didn't want shared anymore. I wanted mine. When Brenna arrived first, she took one look at my face and didn't ask a single question. "Where do you want me to start?" she asked, rolling up her sleeves. That's how you know someone really loves you, not by the words they offer, but by the way they step into your chaos without demanding explanations. Griffin and Callum arrived shortly after. We moved like a quiet system. No shouting, no dramatic pauses, just boxes, suitcases, careful lifting. The sound of tape ripping and drawers sliding shut filled the house where arguments used to live. Around midnight, Griffin stopped and looked at me. "You sure about this?" he asked gently. "Like, completely sure?" I met his eyes. "He told me to leave if I couldn't accept his life," I said. "I'm just respecting his wishes." Griffin nodded slowly. "Fair enough." By 2:30 a.m., both vehicles were packed. I walked back upstairs alone one last time. The closet looked wrong. His side still overflowing. Jackets, shoes, cologne bottles, chaos. My side was empty. Bare hangers. Blank shelves. No trace that I'd ever existed there at all. I went downstairs and grabbed a piece of paper. I didn't write a letter. I didn't explain myself. I didn't defend my choice. I wrote one sentence. "You're right, I don't like it." So I left. I placed my wedding ring next to the note. Not thrown. Not hidden. Just placed. Like punctuation at the end of a sentence that had finally been completed. I didn't cry when I took it off. I'd stopped crying weeks ago. I locked the door from the inside, exited through the garage, and pulled it shut behind me. In the passenger seat of Brenna's truck, I watched the house disappear in the side mirror. "Where to?" she asked softly. "Your place," I said, "if that's still okay. Stay as long as you need." The streets were empty at that hour, quiet in a way that felt respectful, like the world was giving me space. My phone stayed on. I didn't turn it off. I just knew I wouldn't answer. Not tonight, not tomorrow, maybe not ever. When we pulled into Brenna's driveway, the clock on the dashboard read 3:14 a.m. I took one suitcase inside. Just one. Inside her house, with the lights low and the air calm, I finally checked my phone. Nothing. No calls, no messages. He probably wasn't even home yet. I set an alarm for 8:00 a.m. Tomorrow wasn't about emotions. Tomorrow was about logistics, bank accounts, leases, lawyers, boundaries. But for that one night, I slept. And for the first time in months, I didn't wake up with my heart racing. I woke up early, 3 minutes before my alarm, with a strange sensation in my chest. Lightness, like I'd been carrying a weight for so long that my body didn't know how to exist without it yet. Brenna was already awake, coffee brewing. She slid a mug toward me and sat across the table. So, she said carefully, what's the plan? I looked at my phone. Still nothing. It's almost 8, I said. The bank opens at 9. I'm separating my accounts. Then I'm calling the attorney Stephanie used last year. Brenna nodded approvingly. Smart. Did you grab everything important? Birth certificate, passport, tax documents, vehicle title. She leaned back. Good. What about the lease? It's a rental. Both our names are on it, but I already messaged the landlord at 6 this morning. Told him I'm removing myself and Carson will handle it going forward. And? He said as long as rent gets paid, he doesn't care who lives there. Brenna snorted softly. Figures. My phone suddenly exploded. 17 missed calls. 23 messages. I didn't read them carefully. I didn't need to. I could see the pattern just by scrolling. Confusion. Anger. Panic. Bargaining. The most recent message read, "We need to talk. This is childish. You can't just abandon everything." I showed the screen to Brenna. She laughed once, sharp and humorless. He tells you to leave, you leave, and now you're the childish one? I didn't reply. I didn't explain. I just stood up, grabbed my keys, and headed for the door. Because I wasn't reacting anymore. I was moving forward. And that made all the difference. By the time I stepped out of the bank that morning, the reality of what I'd done finally started to sink in. Not as fear, but as momentum. The separation of accounts took 40 minutes. 40 quiet, clinical minutes where my marriage was reduced to numbers on a screen. The bank manager, an older man named Richard, spoke gently, like he could sense this wasn't just paperwork. You'll want to remove yourself from any joint credit cards as well, he said, lowering his voice. I already have that scheduled today, I replied. He nodded. Smart. I transferred everything except $200, just enough to cover my portion of rent for the month, which had already been paid anyway. I wasn't trying to punish Carson. I wasn't trying to trap him. I just wanted clean lines. From the bank, I drove straight to Crawford & Associates. The receptionist recognized the urgency in my voice and squeezed me in that same morning. That's how I met Marlo Chen. Mid-40s, sharp eyes, no wasted words. She didn't smile politely or soften her tone. Tell me everything, she said, pen poised. So I did. 6 years of marriage. No children. No shared property beyond furniture and household items I didn't want. Separate vehicles. Minimal joint debt. A rental lease I was already exiting. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she nodded once. This is refreshingly straightforward. Is that good? I asked. It's excellent, she said. Any infidelity? Emotionally? Yes. Physically? I don't know. And honestly, I don't care. She wrote something down. Virginia is a no-fault state. Unless you're seeking leverage, it doesn't matter. I'm not, I said. I just want out. Clean. Fast. Marlo smiled for the first time. My favorite kind of client. Before I left, she gave me one rule. Do not engage with him, she said firmly. No conversations, no explanations, no closure talks. Everything goes through me. I nodded. Understood. That was when my phone rang. Carson. I declined the call. It rang again. Declined. Then a text came through. Your brother gave me Brenna's address. I'm coming there. My stomach tightened, not with fear, but annoyance. I called Brenna immediately. Change of plans, I said. I'm heading to Griffin's. He figured out where you live. Want me to tell him to leave if he shows up? No, I said. Don't answer the door. He'll get the message eventually. Griffin's apartment was smaller, quieter. He worked remotely as a software developer and barely looked up from his laptop when I arrived. Moving in? He asked, glancing at my suitcase. Just for tonight. He studied me for a second. You seem okay. I decided weeks ago, I said, sitting on the edge of the futon he'd set up for me. Last night was just the execution. Weeks ago. The word hung in the air. He handed me a beer. To self-respect. We clinked bottles. That night, the escalation truly began. Texts from unknown numbers. Calls from his sister. Messages from his parents. Friends I barely spoke to suddenly concerned about hearing Carson's side. I blocked them all. Every single one. Scorched earth? Griffin asked. Clean boundaries, I corrected. By evening, my phone showed 38 missed calls. I didn't read a single message. Brenna texted later. He showed up, pounded on the door. Neighbors almost called the police. He finally left. I stared at the screen, then put the phone face down. The next morning, it got worse. 3 days after I left, Carson showed up at my workplace. I saw his car in the parking lot when I pulled in. He looked terrible. Unshaven, eyes red, wearing one of my old hoodies like it might summon the version of me that used to stay. I walked past him without slowing. Emma, wait, he called. Just 5 minutes. I didn't stop. The security guard at the desk, Charlotte, stepped forward. Ma'am, she said loudly, is this person bothering you? Yes, I answered calmly. Sir, you need to leave the premises immediately or I'll call the police. Are you serious? Carson's voice cracked. I just want to talk to my wife. She's asked you to leave, Charlotte said. That makes this trespassing. I didn't look back. An hour later, my boss, Rebecca, stopped by my desk. Everything okay? She asked gently. Yes, I said. It's handled. She studied me for a moment. If you need time off, let me know. I won't, I said honestly. Work became my refuge. Normal problems, clear solutions. At lunch, my phone rang from an unknown number. This is Dominique, the voice said, tight and uncomfortable. I said nothing. She told me you two were basically roommates, she rushed, that you'd agreed to see other people. She lied, I said calmly. There was a pause. I'm backing off, she said. This is too messy. And just like that, she disappeared. That evening, over dinner, Brenna shook her head. Funny how fast people vanish when consequences show up. I smiled faintly. I wasn't smiling because I'd won. I was smiling because everything was finally aligning with the truth. The escalation wasn't breaking me. It was confirming that leaving had been the right decision all along. People think the darkest moment comes when you leave. It doesn't. It comes after, when the adrenaline fades, when the noise quiets down, and you're left alone with the weight of everything you've lost and everything you can't get back. That night at Griffin's apartment, after the call from Dominique, after the blocking and the messages and the escalation, the silence finally settled in. Real silence. Not the kind filled with tension, the kind that echoes. I lay on the futon staring at the ceiling fan, listening to it hum softly as it rotated. My phone was on silent. My suitcase sat unopened at the foot of the bed. My wedding ring, once a symbol of permanence, was sitting in a drawer at Brenna's house like it belonged to another life. And for the first time since I left, my chest tightened. Not with regret, with grief. Because leaving doesn't mean you stop loving someone overnight. It means you accept that loving them is no longer enough to save you. I thought about the woman I used to be. The one who folded his clothes while he texted someone else. The one who waited up on the couch pretending not to check the clock. The one who rehearsed calm sentences in her head so she wouldn't sound dramatic. That woman didn't disappear the moment I walked out. She was still there, tired, bruised, asking quietly if she'd done the right thing. Around midnight, my old phone buzzed. I almost ignored it. But something, curiosity, maybe weakness, made me check. A message from an unknown number. This was panic. Desperation. A final attempt to anchor me with fear. My hands didn't shake when I took a screenshot. I forwarded it to Marlo with a single line. Document this. It's false, but she's desperate. Her response came quickly. Already noted. Common tactic. Do not engage. I blocked the number. But the damage had already been done, not by the lie itself, but by what it represented. This was how far he was willing to go. Not to fix the marriage, not to take responsibility, but to trap me back into a role I'd finally stepped out of. I rolled onto my side, hugging a pillow to my chest. For the first time since leaving, tears came. Not loud, not messy, just quiet tears soaking into fabric while my body released months of suppressed pain. I cried for the woman who stayed too long. I cried for the version of me who thought patience would eventually be rewarded. I cried for the marriage I'd believed in, even when the man inside it stopped believing in me. And then something else crept in. Fear. What if I was wrong? What if this was the moment I'd regret forever? What if being alone turned out worse than being neglected? The questions spiraled. And in that spiral, I hit bottom. Not because I wanted him back, but because I was standing at the edge of an unknown life without the familiar misery I'd learned how to survive. Griffin knocked softly on the door. You okay? He asked. Yeah, I lied. He didn't push. That's the thing about real support. It doesn't demand performance. After he left, I sat up and took a deep breath. And in that breath, I realized something important. I wasn't afraid of losing him. I was afraid of fully choosing myself. Because once you do that, there's no one left to blame. No illusion to hide behind. No story where you're the victim waiting to be rescued. Just you. And the responsibility to build something better. That realization hurt. But it also lit a small, steady flame inside me. I wiped my face. Turned my phone off completely. And for the first time since everything started unraveling, I let myself sleep. Not because things were okay, but because I finally understood that the worst part was over. I had reached the bottom. And from there, the only direction left was up. The morning after my breakdown didn't arrive with clarity or motivation. It arrived quietly. No dramatic revelation, no sudden strength. Just steadiness. I woke up before Griffin, showered, and stood in front of the mirror longer than usual. My eyes were puffy. My face looked older somehow, like the last few months had finally caught up with me. But beneath that, there was something else. Resolve. My phone was still off. I left it that way while I made coffee and sat at the small kitchen table, watching sunlight crawl across the floor. For the first time in a long while, no one expected anything from me. That space mattered. When I finally turned my phone back on, I didn't brace myself the way I had before. There were new messages, of course there were, but they didn't have power over me anymore. They felt distant, like noise from another room. One voicemail stood out. It wasn't from Carson. It was from Rebecca, my boss. "Emma," she said calmly, "I just wanted to check in. You're doing good work. If anything personal is bleeding into your day, tell me. Otherwise, keep doing what you're doing." That was it. No judgment, no curiosity. Just trust. I didn't realize how badly I needed that until my throat tightened. At work that day, I buried myself in tasks, orders, schedules, spreadsheets, predictable problems, fixable outcomes. Every small accomplishment stacked on the next like proof that my life wasn't collapsing. It was reorganizing. Around lunch, Marlo called. They want to discuss terms. "No discussion," I said immediately. "Standard separation. Clean split." "You're making this easy," she replied. "And expensive for him if he keeps pushing." That was the moment something shifted inside me. Not because I was winning, but because I wasn't reacting anymore. I wasn't defending myself. I wasn't explaining. I was choosing. That afternoon, something else happened, something small but pivotal. I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. Normally, I wouldn't have answered, but I did. "This is Dominique," she said, her voice strained. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I didn't know the full truth. He told me things that weren't real." I listened without interrupting. "He said you were fine with everything," she continued. "That you were checked out, that you didn't care." "I cared," I said calmly. "That was the problem." There was silence. "I'm stepping away completely," she said. "I already did." "I know," I replied. "And for what it's worth, this isn't about you." When the call ended, I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt closure, because the fantasy had collapsed. For everyone. That evening, I drove around aimlessly for a while, then found myself parked outside a small neighborhood I'd passed 100 times before. Quiet streets, modest houses, nothing flashy. I opened a real estate app without thinking. And for the first time, I didn't search with someone in mind. I searched for me, what I could afford, what I wanted, what felt peaceful. That was the turning point. Not the lie, not the confrontation, not the paperwork. The moment I realized I wasn't waiting for permission to build a new life. I already had it. I went home to Griffin's that night lighter than I'd felt in years. Not because everything was solved, but because I finally understood my worth wasn't tied to being chosen by someone who'd stopped choosing me. I chose myself. And from that moment on, everything moved forward. Once I stopped reacting, the fallout stopped feeling like chaos and started feeling like gravity. Everything fell exactly where it should. 3 days after the separation paperwork was served, Carson showed up at my workplace again. I saw his car in the parking lot before I even turned off the engine. He looked worse than before. Unwashed hair, dark circles under his eyes, wearing one of my old college hoodies like it could rewind time. For a brief second, a small part of me felt something close to pity. Then I remembered the black shirt, the cologne, the sentence. I walked past him without slowing. "Emma, please," he called. "Just 5 minutes." I didn't turn around. At the front desk, Charlotte, our security guard, straightened immediately. I'd warned her this might happen. "Ma'am," she said clearly, "is this person bothering you?" "Yes," I answered, my voice steady. "Sir, you need to leave the premises immediately, or I'll call the police." Carson's voice cracked. "I just want to talk to my wife." "She's asked you to leave," Charlotte replied. "That means you're trespassing." I didn't look back as I walked to the elevator. An hour later, Rebecca came by my desk. "Everything okay?" she asked. "It's handled," I said. She studied me for a moment. She'd been divorced herself. She understood without needing details. "If you need time, tell me." "I won't," I said honestly. She nodded. "Good. You're one of my most reliable people. I'd hate to lose that." That mattered more than I expected. The next call came from an unfamiliar number. I answered. "This is Dominique," she said, tense and uncomfortable. "I just wanted you to hear it from me. I'm done. Completely." "I know," I said. "He told me you were basically roommates," she rushed. "That you were fine with everything." "She lied," I corrected softly. "So did he." "I'm stepping away," she said. "This is too messy." And that was it. The great emotional best friend vanished the moment reality arrived. That evening, I met Brenna for dinner. "She came by again," Brenna said, shaking her head. Calm this time. Sad. Asked where you were staying. "And?" I told her I wasn't giving out that information. Brenna smirked. She didn't like that. My phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. We took vows. You can't just quit when things get hard. I showed Brenna the screen. Selective memory, she said dryly. Those vows also included forsaking all others. I typed one response. You told me to leave if I didn't like your life. I left. Enjoy it. Then I blocked the number. The escalation peaked the following weekend. My parents were hosting their monthly family dinner. I arrived early to help, already sensing something was coming. At 6:15 p.m., the doorbell rang. My mother opened it, and there he was. Carson. Behind him stood his sister. I'm sorry to just show up, he said, voice shaking, but she won't take my calls. We need to talk. My father stepped into the doorway. This isn't appropriate, he said firmly. Please, Carson begged. 5 minutes. My mother looked at me. I shook my head. I think you should leave, she said gently but decisively. He turned to me, eyes red. Emma, I didn't mean it. I was angry. I said something stupid. I walked forward. You told me to leave if I didn't like how you lived, I said calmly. I left. There's nothing to fix. His sister stepped in. You're being cruel. He's trying now. Now? I asked quietly. Where was this effort when I asked for boundaries, when I asked for counseling, when I asked to be chosen? Silence. I nodded once. That's what I thought. My father spoke again. You need to go. Now. They left. The house was quiet after. Then my brother exhaled. Well, that had to happen. Later, my mom hugged me. I'm proud of you, she said. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't beg. You just told the truth. That was the fallout. Not revenge. Not screaming. Just consequences. Carson lost the illusion that he could undo everything with regret. His family stopped intervening. His story stopped working once people saw the full picture. And I didn't have to destroy him. I just stopped protecting him from the reality of his own choices. That was enough. 6 months passed faster than I expected. Not because time heals everything, but because when you stop fighting reality, life has a strange way of moving forward without asking permission. The house filled up slowly, not all at once. A couch from a thrift store. A kitchen table I built myself one Saturday afternoon, sanding the edges until my hands were sore. Secondhand chairs that didn't match but felt honest. Nothing fancy. Everything mine. Work promoted me to senior coordinator. Rebecca said I'd earned it. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them. Showing up consistently, quietly, and without drama had become my strength. The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday in October. A simple manila envelope. No ceremony, no music, no audience. I opened it at my kitchen table, coffee steaming beside me in a machine I bought myself, in a house I owned alone. 6 years of marriage, legally over. I read the final decree once, folded it carefully, and placed it in a drawer. Then I went to work. That weekend, Griffin and Brenna came over for dinner. Burgers on the grill, beer, football playing softly in the background, laughter filling the space where tension used to live. How does it feel? Griffin asked. Being officially single again? I smiled. Feels like I've been single for months. The paperwork just caught up. Brenna raised her bottle. To self-respect. We clinked. Later that night, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I already knew. I heard it's final. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. You deserve better. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I typed, I know, that's why I left. And I blocked the number. Not out of anger, out of closure, because I didn't need the last word anymore. Here's what I learned. What I hope someone listening needs to hear. You cannot love someone into respecting you. You cannot fix a relationship where only one person is trying. And you should never confuse patience with self-erasure. The night he told me to leave if I didn't like his life, he thought he was calling my bluff. He thought I'd bend. He thought I'd beg. He thought I'd stay. Instead, I listened. I left. And I built something better. Not with him, not to spite him, but because I finally chose myself. The chapter is closed. The door is locked. And for the first time in years, I am free.